So while all that's happening in the Middle East, the president about to leave Qatar to go to the UAE. Big news coming out of Turkey. Moments ago in the Turkish capital of Ankara, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky arrived ahead of peace talks set to begin today with Russia in Istanbul, aimed at finding an end to the war. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, along with presidential envoys Steve Witkoff and retired Army Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, expected to join the negotiations tomorrow. Secretary Rubio arrived in Turkey yesterday for meetings with NATO officials. Russia's Vladimir Putin is not expected to attend this week's peace talks in Turkey. President Trump addressed Putin's absence from the negotiations during a business roundtable earlier today in Qatar.
Mr. President, no Putin's address. Are you disappointed by that?
No, I didn't anticipate. I actually said, why would he go if I'm not going? Because I wasn't going to go. I wasn't planning to go. I would go, but I wasn't planning to go. And I said, I don't think he's going to go if I don't go. And that turned out to be right. But we have people there. Marco, as you know, is doing a fantastic job. Marco's there, Secretary of State, and we have people there. But I didn't think it was possible for Putin to go if I'm not there.
Let's bring in NBC News Chief International Correspondent Keir Simmons live from Istanbul, Turkey. Keir, what's the latest there?
Well, Willie, Marco Rubio isn't here right now. Not here by the Bosphorus here in Istanbul. He's in Antalya, where there is a informal NATO meeting, long planned. The Russians are here, but they are a much reduced group of negotiators than might have been expected, led by Vladimir Medinsky, the former culture minister in Russia, a man who does not have the stature, for example, of Foreign Minister Lavrov or other members of the Russian delegation that have been negotiating with Steve Witkoff. So it's difficult to tell exactly what we're going to get. It doesn't seem to be going very well. Right now, President Zelensky is Antakya, the capital, and he is there meeting with Erdogan. Already, though, the Russians and Ukrainians throwing abuse at each other from a distance. So Zelensky saying that President Putin has simply sent stand-in props for these negotiations. The media are here in force, believing that we might get the first Ukraine-Russian talks in 3 years. You can see the crowd here behind me. That's the former Ottoman Palace, where in 2022, I was here then too, the negotiations that failed took place. Why everyone thinks it's going to be in there, not clear, because first of all it was thought that it was going to happen at 10 a.m. local time this morning, then after 12, still no sign of negotiators. Maybe the only reason everyone's here is because this is where it happened last time. One Russian TV crew tells us that they've booked their flight home tomorrow, expecting it to be a day that hasn't started. And meanwhile, as I mentioned, the Secretary of State not here yet, but talking to reporters about why the US still believes this is important.
The big issue on everyone's mind is what's happening with Russia and Ukraine. The President of the United States has been abundantly clear he wants the war to end. He's open to virtually any mechanism that gets us to a just, enduring, and lasting peace. And that's what he wants to see. He wants to see an end to wars. He wants to keep wars from happening.
Big headline, Willie, is that President Putin saying, making it clear that he's not coming. And then, as you heard at the top there, President Trump saying, well, that's probably because I'm not coming. So this isn't the face-to-face leaders summit that we thought a few days ago might be possible.
Keir, was there expectation that President Putin would be there from the Ukrainian side? And are they disappointed that he's not?
Oh, I think the Ukrainian side are deeply cynical about all of this. I mean, really what's happening here is both the Russians and the Ukrainians are trying to stay on the right side of President Trump, even though President Trump isn't here, trying not to be blamed when the talks, well, if the talks fail, but you think when, don't you, really? Because the Russians are saying, well, we're here to talk about what they call the root causes, and we're here in Istanbul to pick up the negotiations where we left off. Well, those negotiations were talking about things like that Ukraine should be largely neutral, something the Ukrainians would never sign up to now. On the other hand, the Ukrainians are making clear that the only thing they really want to talk about here is whether Russia is prepared to begin a full and lasting ceasefire. There's the size of the Bosphorus between them, and I'm not sure how you bridge that gulf.
NBC's Keir Simmons live in Istanbul. Keir, thanks as always for your reporting. David, sounds like expectations pretty low for these negotiations in Turkey.
For the moment, Willie, this is a blame game. It is interesting. President Trump said that he wanted a 30-day ceasefire. Zelensky responded, okay, I'll have a 30-day ceasefire. Putin stalled. President Trump said, I want to see a meeting in Turkey between the two sides. Zelensky, within minutes, said, I'll be there. And Putin is sending very junior people to represent Russia. So this is a situation in which Zelensky's trying to tell Trump, you're being played by Vladimir Putin. Wake up. And the hope that he has, I just was in Kyiv last week, the Ukrainian hope is that Trump will see that he needs to put pressure on Russia in a way that he's put pressure on Ukraine to get these negotiations into a real phase where it's not sparring and who's going to be here, and but a real negotiation. But they're trying, as I say, they want no distance right now between Trump and Zelensky.
And there are signs that it might be working. In the last few weeks, President Trump has really changed his rhetoric towards Putin, expressed real impatience with his unwillingness to get to a deal. We heard from the Secretary of State there saying the president basically would take any mechanism to get a ceasefire, to get the fighting to stop, and Russia continues to drag its feet. We reported last week about the sanctions they're considering. President Trump talked about them again earlier this week, that they are on the table. He has still never in his career really defied Putin. So I think there is skepticism among those in Washington, certainly those in Kyiv, that this might be the moment to do so. But this is the closest he's come. And I think there is a sense that if Russia doesn't show, I've been told, if Russia doesn't show some good faith effort here, I think we might get an angry Trump feeling like Putin is trying to humiliate him.